And looks like we're live here. Thank you. Today I have a guest on named Scott, and I welcome to my YouTube channel. Also, visit me at proxyearth.substack.com, as you can see right behind me here. Um, I I have a lot of interesting things to do. My newest film called Vanishing Point is available now to watch for free to the entire public. It is a three-part philosophy film regarding the contents of zetetic astronomy and whether nuclear weapons even exist or not. Um, you just go in there and have fun. Like it's great for a movie night, and I would love to hear feedback and responses. But most of all, that's one thing, and we'll check it out sometime. And please, we're accepting free subscribers. Paid subscribers get shout outs on my future films. So anyways, today we have a guest named Scott. He's from New Zealand. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started here. I guess I should fill in the crowd of anyone listening here that we're going to be speaking about the problems of totalitarianism knocking on your doorstep. And I'd like for you to give Scott the opportunity to tell his story as best as possible for himself. So, Scott, go ahead. Let's hear what you got.
Yeah, evening everyone. Thank you. So I guess just a bit of background about me. Born and bred on a farm. Went to banking. Was involved in banking for a long time, and had my own building company. Worked at high levels of major corporations, multinational institutions. So got a good insight into them. So I've done the banking, the development, the building, the real estate, and then more recently I've kind of just been focusing on, probably highlighting the issues inherent in the system, and that kind of has made me a bit of a targeted individual, and I've certainly noticed an increase in the last couple of years with interference with my tech, gang stalking, breaking my monetization on Facebook and the ability to make and earn money. That's kind of put me in a position that I kind of had to take a stand on certain things around monetary aspects, and that has kind of snowballed into quite a large aspect now that's I've kind of put everything on the line. I've had my house stolen from me, which I've lived in for 13 years, and everything I own. I was arrested and taken out of my house with basically the shirt on my back, and they've kept that as well. They've taken that out in an unmarked vehicle to a undisclosed location, having requested it 3 times, so effectively that's a crime and they've stolen it. There's been lots of interesting things going on, and that's kind of a bit of a wrap up. I've got it in High Court at the moment, New Zealand High Court, and that has been currently in process. Very confident with the evidence and the lack of due process that's been followed, and the failures and incompetence and forgery that's occurred against me. Quite a large injustice, and it's been a layered effect with people that have been in the system, kind of stonewalling, obstructing, and really been naughty boys and girls all along the way.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of your uploads and such, which obviously we'll be able to mirror and provide on my Substack page below a portal for this conversation. But if anybody is curious about some of the hard evidence for what Scott is referring to here, that's kind of what I intend to provide. I wanted to give Scott a platform to just speak himself freely. There's no censorship here regarding anything you can say, Scott. So what I noticed was it's very simple. Like you had your house stolen from you. You were living there, from what I remember, 14 years.
Yeah, 13, 14 years. 2013 when I purchased it. So, I'd had my family there. I've bought special trees and planted. I've buried pets there. I've done a lot of work and maintenance to the home. I've really created it as a home. I think it's got one of the best views in Auckland, overlooking it, and like I say, yeah, it's a place that the family, and I call home. And unfortunately, unlawfully, it was. People trespassed onto my property, and they broke and entered my property, the police, unlawfully, without any warrant, no warrant presented or served. and yeah, basically kidnapped me without my consent and under duress, and yeah, then the process kind of began. So it's been an interesting kind of 6 weeks while I've been forced dispossessed of my home while I'm I'm fighting to get back into it.
Yeah, it looks horrifying, but it's reminiscent of like, obviously we have the problem of like, encroaching totalitarianism, increasing its ability to take its grip upon Western nations. Like, what I notice here, at least where I'm at in the Midwest, is it's a little more passive here, but the advent of totalitarianism has moved into the emotional behaviors of people, whereas people are vetting people for their ideology, whether they're on the left or the right. And skin color has become a thing. All this talk about identity politics is just wasting as much time as possible, and it seems to be like paving a way for the new world order. And just to mirror, like, hey, here's what our situation is here. It's like, I just remember when I first moved up here to the Midwest, it was really easy for people to get the opportunities to achieve an autonomous economy. So we're being attacked in the forms of like crippled economics, right? And then what you're being attacked with is a little bit more direct, and it was just literally knocking on your door. I mean, these people were just like, the police just showed up at your place, ignored everything you were saying, didn't seem to have the kind of rights that Americans might have, which we still have some sense of constitutional rights. But I'm on the same page with you as far as like, beyond the legal, there's the law and the common law, and we know the difference between the law of the land and the admiralty stuff. Like, I've looked at like a lot of the Brandon Joe Williams stuff, and I find it very interesting. But but quite literally, the totalitarian state came and knocked on your door, and just full on took your house away from you for sake of a greedy real estate person. From what I
Yeah, I'll give a bit of background if you like to what kind of led up to it. It has been a battle for probably the last 16, 18 months. But effectively, I had a mortgage which I'd signed with HSBC, and again, the merit of that could be looked into if you go into the the fiat currency back in a mortgage. I know there was a Supreme Court ruling recently in January 25 where they ruled against dispossession of houses with the mortgages. I think it was the Barclay and Moore case. I need to double check that, but that's something actually we could add below to the Substack info. But yeah, essentially, I challenged the fact that HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation in New Zealand, sold my debt to a corporation called Pepper New Zealand Limited, and they did the transfer, but again, there was no contract between myself and Pepper. There was no consent from myself. They basically are trying to refer to a clause in a contract that says that it's able to be transferred, but again, there has been no consent. There's no signatures or consideration or transfer of any kind of real money between myself and Scott Robert Gordon, the legal entity, and Pepper New Zealand Limited. So there's been no due consideration. There's no meeting of minds. There's no due process around any transfer of, or the mortgagee transfer. So effectively, they come to me saying, we now own your debt, and it's like, well, thanks very much, but who are you? And then they say, well, start transferring your money in this direct debit to this account. So I was like, well, I challenged that, and I asked questions. The lawyers obviously get involved, and they transferred it, but they delivered a letter to my doorstep saying I'm in default, and I recognised that, and I came back and asked a lot of questions around, well, where's your contract? How did you transfer this mortgage? What rights did you have in administrating that? There was silence, and then there was a bit of an ongoing to and froing with correspondence between them, basically, asking fair questions around wanting to know, justifying, proving proof of claim, how can you do this? But effectively, they are relying on the fact that there was a letter dropped on my door saying that I was in default, and then the next formal notice or next thing I get is basically a real estate agent asking to do an appraisal on my home, and advising they're going to sell it. So at that point, I had to try and stop the process with an interlocutory application to the New Zealand High Court to try and stop that process, because there'd been no court case or no High Court writ, no for possession of sale or mortgagee sale advice. No court case had been held to give anyone any authority to sell the home and land, and there'd been no High Court writ. There'd been no contract to substantiate or proof of claim substantiated, which I'd been asking for, and there'd been no service, which needs to be in person with service saying, this is a High Court writ saying that, we're going to sell your home. So none of that has occurred. So due process has definitely failed. I had actually offered legal remedy to stay in honour for, in the eventuation that it was found to be an issue. So I wanted to remain in honour, and I made legal offer of remedy, which was in the form of a $10 coin, which is legal tender in New Zealand under New Zealand Reserve Bank Act 2021 legislation, and under section 153 1.a, it alludes to legal tender for $10 coins being able to pay for any amount. So effectively, a real money coin, legal tender, can actually pay for any amount billed or invoiced, which they're trying to invoice for funds, which is different from money if we're going to go into that. So effectively I remained in honour, but I got an interlocutory in. The next step is the interlocutory application that I delivered on the 22nd of October was accepted under a waiver, with waiver of fees, but then I went home waiting for asking, when's the court case going to be? Oh, we don't know yet, we're planning it. The next I get is an email from the registrar saying, the hearing's been had, here's the judge's judgment, we're declining your interlocutory application. And I was gobsmacked, because it's like I haven't been served a writ, I haven't been serviced, and I haven't had an opportunity to challenge this case. So what had happened is that the very next day, on the 23rd of October, somehow the defendant's counsel turned up at the court, had the hearing with the judge, without the plaintiff being Scott Gordon being present, and then there been a hearing and judgment passed on in absolute ignoring the points made around equity and consideration and the contract and of the case. So they went along, but it feels like they just turned up, had a little coffee and a powwow together, and decided what they were going to do, and then issued the judgment, because I hadn't actually even been notified of the court hearing by the registrar. So somehow the defendant's counsel have communicated that there was a hearing to them, but there was no notification to myself to be made aware there was a hearing. So, like I say, they proceeded without me, and then that's kind of eventuated into, the next steps.
It sounds like you just got finessed. You got finessed by greedy people who, what happened is you didn't even sign anything. You weren't even talked to. They just one day showed up and said, "This isn't your home anymore." And to me, that's what it's exactly what the function is. And so, there's some people who, it makes me wonder, because I've always been talking about this, especially in the platform of I like to make coffee drinks for people and ask questions, and I have really amazing coworkers that bounce ideas with, and I just like to ask sometimes, what is it when a home is empty, or somebody is out of it or gone or whatever? What entitles these real estate people to just go up and claim ownership of it? And then what entitles them to sell it to someone saying, yeah, they have just enough income to pay for the monthly payments or whatever, and then it's banker stuff, right? And And then what is it that's like? I can't think of anything worse. Like I'd rather just like literally, most people should probably come to their senses and say, oh, it might not be a bad idea to figure out how to build our own homes because, man, like 25 years of your life paying whatever to whoever, and why? What makes them own this land? And then that's why the common law stuff is important, and that's why you have such a deep esoteric knowledge of that common law stuff. But it seems that the statesmen on your side of the world have completely abandoned any sort of connection to the common law stuff. It's almost like the most immature people have taken over. Like complete like brain dead parasites have taken over the human host, in which occupy these positions that do this thing of like neglecting the fact that this guy, this gentleman's home is just being stolen from him. He raised his family here, and so, because someone wants to see a profit, right? And it's just
Yeah, someone claims that they purchased something of me without actually giving me any benefit from the transaction, and then determine that I can be bought and sold, and my house can be bought and sold without any consent or contract between me. I didn't sign any sale and purchase for the place. They claim it under their own legislation, like I say, which they've finessed. So it's been a definite case of injustice, and a fraud actually has occurred where, again, no High Court writ has been issued, no service, no contract. But the corrupt lawyers, which is a firm, Minter Ellison Rudd Watts, which actually acts on behalf of a lot of the banks in New Zealand, do a lot of mortgages, and I'm part of a law council which has record and evidence of this being a systemic pattern. They use the same strategy for dozens or more homes around New Zealand. One of the instances where the police entered a woman's home who on a similar situation, and they entered without any kind of warrants, and she was pregnant, and they tasered her, and they dragged her out of her home as well. So the cops basically just.
How did that work out? Like, I mean,
I don't have full. Basically, I think she's a similar situation, being made homeless from that, but I don't have full insight into that case. But that's just an example of one of the, there's many of these happening. Like I say, a pattern of the fact that they're not doing due process, issuing, High Court writ or getting a court case to actually determine whether or not they have any right or proof of claim to just do the sale. They're just taking of their own accord, and because they have the function behind the scenes where they have the ability to do under land transfer the title, and the transferred Land Information New Zealand accepts that the lawyer has done the certification, the fact remains that they've done the fraud without having the right documents behind the scenes. So that is actually a crime under the Crimes Act 1961 for New Zealand. And secondly, there's basically for them to kind of walk in and get the home. They've basically transferred, because they realised they couldn't, because I was challenging and asking questions and they couldn't provide any evidence. I feel that the point that I gave a letter with 42 maxims of law, which disputed and pretty much made pretty clear that they weren't entitled to, hadn't have any right to the property. They then transferred or said that the house had been sold within an hour or two of that, receiving that letter, to one of their stooges, who then has now kind of done their process where they've transferred the title. They've gone to the tenancy tribunal, which is a function of tenants and landlords, which has no relation to my no jurisdiction or authority over my case, because I didn't even have a High Court writ. But because she went in there and called herself the landlord over me because she presented the title, and again I wasn't present at that hearing either, I hadn't been given any service or information about it, hadn't seen it. Next thing, she's been issued an eviction notice, saying that you're the landlord, I'm a squatter in my own home of 14 years and I have no rights. She gives that to the bailiff. The bailiff goes and knocks on the door and asks me, and I said, look, you got no jurisdiction or right here, this is a civil matter. He gives up after 2 minutes and calls the police. The police arrive pretty hot. Felt like a sting operation because there's about 10 of them turn up. So gang tactics there, and basically turn up without no warrant presented, and I advised them that I withdrew consent. There is no jurisdiction here, that they had no right to be. I trespassed them, but they said they're coming in, and basically, again, without any sight, any warrant or any knowing them, and having told them that it's a civil matter, they have no jurisdiction here, they still decided to break and enter. My door took about 30 or 40 kicks. The guy gave up kicking it in, one of the policemen, and then they got the rammer out. This is while I had about myself and 4 witnesses in the house, and then they broke the door down. By then there was 1 witness left in the house. They arrested him. He was a 73-year-old man, and put his arm against his back, and then arrested me, and basically took me down to the station for processing. I refused consent at every point through I didn't contract with them at all. I didn't identify myself because I remained a man, Scott, and I did not demonstrate that I was a legal entity that they could contract with. I think that was a benefit in the fact that they couldn't actually process me, do anything. They then chose to take everything off me, and asked me to remove my watches and jewellery, which I didn't consent to. Under duress, they removed that off me, and then they took me down to the cells and basically left me there for a few hours. Came down and tried to intimidate me, say, look, if you don't accept you've been trespassed. If you don't accept the trespass, we're going to take you down to court. And they said, court closes in 10 minutes. If you don't tell us, you're going to leave you in here overnight. I refused to consent again on both of those, and left me another hour or so, and then eventually they took me down to the district court, kept me in the court cell rooms for another few hours. Again, I've done nothing wrong here, and I'm being processed like a criminal. And then they put me into a cell, a criminal who turns up next to me in the cell with me. But we had a bit of a yarn. I told him how things were. Then they put me into the docks. Again, I didn't consent. I didn't acknowledge the court. I asked the court's jurisdiction and their cause and nature of jurisdiction, which they said it was New Zealand jurisdiction, and again I didn't consent. I didn't acknowledge that I didn't have any title. They had no right to be there, but they just bulldozed through and ignored all of my protestations, and basically trespassed me from my own home for 2 years. Or trespassed, I should say, Scott Robert Gordon, which is the legal entity, not Scott the man. And again, I was then taken out of the cells after processing. They gave me the bail. Tried to bail me out to another home. Again, I didn't consent to that or the conditions, and then I didn't sign the bail or the trespass notices that they tried to offer me on the way out, and so at that point I declined, and they let me go. So effectively I went in and out of their system without kind of being touched or agreeing or contracting with anything.
And as a consequence for you standing up for yourself, you lost the home in which you raised your family in.
Yeah, that's still currently being fought for, and I just had my High Court hearing on Monday, and so we're waiting for the results of that. I presented all the evidence. Again, the Defence Counsel tried to influence and do what they do, but effectively, for the lack of evidence, the lack of due process, it should really be a cut and dried process. But unfortunately, because the judges are also seem to have been part of the Law Society, and they have to defend the bar and the jurisdiction and the Admiralty law jurisdiction, it's in question, and she has reserved a judgment, which is interesting, because why would you reserve judgment when it's been plainly made obvious to you that there's been no due process, no High Court writ, no service? So she is allowing the fraud to occur and continue, and the proceedings to continue, when they should have been called a long way back. So yeah, I'm really at a point now where we're having to, again, the LINZ, which is the Land Information New Zealand, has blockaded any caveats against the title. They've restricted and given no reason for doing so. So right through the process, everyone that's touched it, at the time that the woman had taken over the property, and her husband or partner have were taking the things out of my property, trying to intimidate and influence me. They backed up with an unmarked truck, took the majority of my belongings out. I've probably got I've got my whole life's belongings in that home, and they took that to an unmarked location. I asked 3 times where it was. She refused to tell me. So effectively that has been stolen. I had footage of that, and I was recording them as they were doing it. Again, being careful just to kind of not give the cops an opportunity on the basis of that they think that I've been trespassed. So I have to kind of tread a line there where she's weaponised bureaucracy against me, and because there's been a fraud committed for that. So I'll just have to kind of stay in peace and be calm and effectively try and navigate the system, but I guess collecting evidence along the way. So I had my day in court, and that's kind of where we're at now, is waiting. So we're putting further requests in for caveats and asking for reasons why and serious reconsideration because there's been a fraud committed. Again, at the time when the gear was being stolen, I rang the police over 14 times and recorded that, and at each point when I said there was a crime being committed, they ignored it and said, "Oh, talk to your lawyer." I wrote a formal police complaint to the police and provided evidence and an affidavit. I've provided affidavits of fact, which were unrebutted, and none of them responded to me. So Ministry of Justice, bailiffs, New Zealand Police, the lawyers representing the defendants, again no responses. So that became a key part of the process in the High Court, is to do an affidavit of fact and then do an affidavit of service, which proves that you've served it to those. So I ran around to a lot of people and served those in front of and recorded that to make sure I had recordings of the fact that they'd been served and evidence. And then I provided and gave them due process on the thing. And then afterwards I gave a notice to them that the affidavit of fact being unrebutted was now becoming a notice to admit fact. So then it goes into court and is effectively a fact in court and can't be disputed. And again, so these facts are pretty strong and obvious, but the fact that there's been no judgment made on the in a pretty black and white situation is concerning, and shows an insight into the New Zealand justice system and the kind of there are some real issues in there. Like I say, no due process, and I question the integrity of the system, and they've really brought it into disrepute with their behaviours and actions.
And that's just what's going on, is like you just got tooled around with in the biggest way, and you were chosen. And it's like you mentioned at the beginning of this, you feel I mean, I agree that this stuff is really going on, but to many people who might be listening who don't understand what a targeted individual is, I mean, I know what it's like. I mean, obviously I make my sort of countercultural content, meaning like stuff that disputes against modern science and such, but the amount of like people just getting tooled around with, right, that kind of starts to constitute the line of what a targeted individual might be, and you have a right to feel that way at this point, because what, like, you can't even feel so everyone in the whole world is supposed to think that they can't even have a safe, like, the line of scrimmage has moved past, it's moved into the body, which we noticed with the past 5 years of their wonderful Operation Warp Speed campaign. But like, to not even have a safe zone within your own home, the state has encroached to that point. And then if you want to be left alone, you have to constantly pay money into their system. You have to constantly play this game and the game is called Let's Trade Pieces of Paper Until You Die. And what you're citing is like, no, there's still common law, there's still law of the land, and there's still universal law, things like that, things of like spiritual value. And what I think is going on, Scott, is from the contents of what I'm writing about in my book, having been a hardcore musician for many years, and then seeing the antithesis of that play out on the world stage, where literally the entire world participated in this massive ritual, and everybody should know what I'm talking about at this point. And like, it's the elephant in the room for the people who are afraid to talk about it, but it's the C19 stuff. Like, it's you and I both might know our things about it, but for people who are listening along who aren't too caught up, I did make a film called Beyond Good and Evil on my Substack page. I wrote an article called The Formula. For paid subscribers, you can read the rough draft of my book that is still in the works, but section 2 of my book completely unpacks the terrain model, completely unpacks like the fact that contagion has never been scientifically proven. Now, like I'm a person who considers I consider my thoughts to be beyond science, but if we are to have a discourses within the frameworks of science, then the burden of proof shifts to the ones who make the claim, and they have not satiated that proof. And then this also plays out in the sense of like, well, now they just got carried away because, I remember in 2020 noticing videos and watching Jacinda Ardern, who's the New Zealand Prime Minister, making a lot of hasty comments about people who wouldn't inject themselves with the poison, people who would refuse to comply, people who might be, well, in our case, we're too disillusioned. Like, we looked into it, we researched it, and now we're just trying to tell our friends, hey, don't get tricked, yeah? Don't get messed with by these fools. They're vampires. And what's happened is some people there have, I mean, I noticed this here, Scott, like even just here. What happened is the C19 stuff went off, and some people really got like what seems to be like Resident Evil 4 brain worms, and they're addicted to a lying narrative. They're addicted to something that encroaches upon the individual, and it doesn't even benefit the people who are enforcing it. The people who were knocking down your door in those videos on your Facebook account, like the people who were doing all that, it's like, did those people really just go home and have dinner with their kids just fine, knowing they just stole someone's home for some real estate deal that is just, you didn't even consent to it, you never saw this paperwork? That, I think that's why we need to educate the public about what a targeted individual is. A targeted individual might be someone who is a bit too disillusioned, and they might have and this isn't to play a victim card at all. Like, I'm no victim. We're not even trying to be like that. I just wanted to give you a platform in which you can say something at all in recorded medium, so that the context for your entire argument is retained, because obviously the whole advent of big tech and Facebook and such, like they have the right, like it's their website. So right now, they could at any point in time just be like, oh, we're just going to take your stuff down, haha, and they'll just play little games with you to buy themselves time. But yeah, if you could maybe unpack what maybe help any listener along here figure out what a targeted individual is. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's a bit there, but I guess if I think back probably a couple of years ago when I started speaking out about certain things, and I'll come to those soon. But effectively, once I'd been identified, I think because AI is so prevalent amongst everything, it has the ability to kind of, the bots kind of start attacking. I think of them like the Sentinels from the Matrix. Like, they are coming in and they are bringing false. I had a real estate business where I was selling, and I got false bots, inquiries. I had a really good system actually created, and on the first day that I got it up and running, I had 11 leads, and I was like, holy hell, we're away here, this is great. I could convert those, but that lasted a day, and it was broken, and it's like, hang on, this isn't quite how it right. And then even after that point, it was never able to kind of get the same momentum and things where I hadn't changed anything. So that's an instance of that. I had. Prior to that, I'd sold probably 40 contracts on a large development. It seems the banks had kind of stopped their funding on that one, and it wound up. So that one cost me about $400,000 because I wasn't able to settle on the properties that I'd sold there. So, another impact onto my bottom line. And again, this is a domino effect from the C19 implications of, the money that's flowing and the amount of, the decisions made by politicians and council and everyone else to stop, funding, close up shops, stop businesses like that, has a domino effect on the whole economy, and obviously that impacts on everyone. So again, not claiming the victim, but that is kind of how the cycles and systems are created to, create hardship, take houses and equity and property off people, and then start again and pump it up, and they just get these cycles going. So further to that, then you kind of get certainly once I had the court issues and applications underway, I noticed a significant increase in the electronic interference on all of my kind of assets, being phones, with phone calls being cut off midway, lack of internet access after kind of critical meetings, stopping my access to emails at key points during the process in the court, and just overall just phone settings being reset. It goes to silent when you haven't touched the settings. Phone calls not ringing, so you're missing calls from your attorney. Basically just gaslighting you, and really affecting how you're kind of trying to operate. So that's with, two arms behind my back, because I'm out of my home. I'm operating out of friends' places on mattresses and without evidence and without computers. So, and coupled with that with the electronic interference. So it's really a case of trying to shut me up, or put me down and keep me down, because of certain things that I speak of and aspects and things that I want kind of the public to become aware of. It is a case of certainly feeling being targeted, and that's kind of impacted financially. It's impacted my emotional state, and psychologically it's been kind of almost civil terrorism and torture, because of the way that they've been approaching it and continually kind of doing this stuff. It's impacted on the relationship with my son, who he's with his mother for a period. We did have 50-50 access, but that's impacted on my ability to see him, because I don't have a home effectively to bring him in that's close, that can kind of be close to his school and work. So I've sacrificed a fair bit of time with him over the last 6 to 8 weeks. That impacts on him as well, because this is not only disturbing, it's a disturbing thing. I'm stressed. I'm not probably been as the father I'd like to be with him, and that's impacting on him as well. So the acts have had repercussions across the board, for family, for myself, and whatnot. And obviously, the stress goes back into the family. But again, it's something I've been preparing for a long time mentally, and been able to kind of do that. But they certainly have that. I think now they've really given me the greatest gift, which is actually I've got nothing to lose. I am now a devoted adversary to that, and I will not stop until I'm back in my home, because I have all the evidence. I've done nothing wrong, and these guys have literally fraudulently decided to take and steal my home and make money off something that isn't really, I think, a just cause. And again, if you come back to even the relationship between kind of this is on the land jurisdiction, common land, and they are applying admiralty jurisdiction, so they're effectively acting as pirates. One of the outcomes, or in one of the eviction order, actually, one of the guys that wrote it, the registrar, said, depending on what's win, the fruits will be awarded to the winner. So it's like, the spoils of war. So they're talking like that. And that eviction order was actually unsigned and unsealed, just like the other High Court documents that were issued as well. They're all unsigned and unsealed. These are in contravention of the High Court rules as well. So their own rules, come and go. That the cops say, it's a civil matter. I tell the cops it's a civil matter. They break into my home acting criminally themselves. When I tell them my gear's been stolen, I don't know where it is. It's a civil matter. We're not getting involved. It's not a crime. So it's horses for courses, and two rules and double standards for them when it suits them. It does feel like I've been kind of black marked by someone in the system, and wherever I've turned up, they've been turning their back on me, and I've real human rights abuses in that regard there as well. So we'll escalate as far as we need to go into international law and above. We've made aware the politicians, the Attorney General, Governor General. My family has my great grandfather was a mayor in England, in Devon. He's back in 1890s, and he got a service and a royal edict by the King of England at that time to become a free man. So effectively any progeny from his family has free man status, and I haven't found that that free man status at all been applied because of the things I've been subject to. I've notified them of the case and requested them to acknowledge that. I haven't had any acknowledgement back from the Governor General to that point either. So yeah, approaching it from different aspects, effectively, even looking at real money, which is coinage, and tradable versus the funds that have become these crazy numbers that have been inflated on computer screens and have allowed these people to kind of finesse the system and create cycles of has really made it quite the ability and weaponized that system for them to kind of take property, and the wrong people are currently in power and using those systems to their advantage. So yeah, big issues in the system, and we need people to stand up and talk about it, bring exposure to it, and basically they need ridicule because these people are operating totally outside the law and the due process, something that's been established over thousands of years, and they are basically taking the mickey. And so yeah, it's definitely time for people to stand up and question and not accept what the current things that are going on in the system.
Yeah, correct. And it's either that or everybody just gets in line and we all just continue taking these abuses. And right now I've just been asking the common person, the layman, the common person out there, just been like, look at this old cathedral. Do you think that the person who had time to figure out how to construct this was paying money to live every month? And then even so, it's like, well, like you were saying, somehow, in some way you have lost $400,000. That implies that you've had $400,000. So that right out the window, what's right there is that you've had your traps set, you've had your shit together, and what's happened is the state is just doing, it seems to be the agenda coming out of Davos, Switzerland, which is the Great Reset stuff that I've warned people about 5 years ago. And for anyone else listening, like, there's many people who the common denominator for people who didn't understand whatever I was throwing down 5 years ago. I've been writing lyrics about this kind of stuff since I was in this band Strip Minds, which I started in 2009. And I was reading books about this since I was a teenager. So I'm 36 years old now. When I was 19, I read Behold a Pale Horse. I read some books leading up to that. I was a little pizza boy as a very young kid, and I remember some guy handed me like David Icke DVDs and stuff, and that was really that was kind of exciting, So I'm just like, I'm just looking at this stuff, being like, well, we have to actually be philosophers about this. We have to actually think about this. We have to care about our fellow man. And to me, I'm like, well, I can think of one thing. It's just, let's let this guy come on and talk. And, I can understand also, like, you've probably been messed with so much to the point where, it's why you're like, I'm just going to be Scott from New Zealand, I understand. I'm myself. I'm like, I'm with you, because here's the thing, nothing to lose. Well, they've given us nothing to gain. Like, there's no point. Like, if someone buys a house today and they just believe the narrative of everything and they get their booster shots and whatever, then the state's like, okay, I guess you could keep your home. And besides that, they're just out there starting wars. They're giving money to Israel, okay? And And then beyond that, they're giving over, well, here in America, and I'd like to know what you think of it there, but here in America, the advent of modern science has grafted a lot of money from the taxpayer towards the space agencies, which are, for the common person out there, they think they're going to space. They think they're out there in space taking pictures like this one. Like, you think this couldn't be art? Really? Have you ever seen Star Wars, y'all? What a wonderful world. And that's just it. Is like, enough is enough. Like our grandparents' generation, they probably paid like 10, chump change for their homes, but they didn't realize they were buying into a system which would eventually turn into this. Like, no peer of mine who's like, let's say they're above the age of a teenager, like, hey, you're about old enough to like smoke cigarettes and start a cool band, all the way up into my age-ish generation, a little older than me. That chunk of people is like, we're the adults in the room now. I can't think of any of these people unless they have some sort of massive finesse of money online to figure out something, to just throw cash around. I can't think of any reason why these people would buy a home at the moment. And I even heard something about like how there's like 1 million empty homes out in Florida. It's like, well, what's up with that? And the real estate market is just like, oh, the real estate market's in crisis. It's like, well, it should be. It shouldn't exist. Like, what is this? Like, can we not? I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, that brings me to question. What is a person who has their own home, like, doing, owning 10 properties and then subleasing into whatever? It's like, the place where I'm at, there's no security here. They have a fake cop car. Like in the game Metal Gear Solid, you can throw like a fake version of yourself out there for the guards to chase, but it fakes them out. Well, we have a fake cop car here. Okay, they don't. They're so tight and greedy with their money that they want to just like, oh, here's a fake cop car, and maybe nobody will come and do stuff. Well, okay, so that's not a dog turd in the hallway. That's a human turd in the hallway, and no one did it. No one who lived here would do that. They all have bathrooms. So what's going on? And what's happened is beyond the realms of home ownership, now we have, people who don't have a home everywhere, and we have empty homes everywhere, and they know that they can't deal with all this because then that would put the housing market into crisis, which it should. The housing crisis, the housing market doesn't even deserve to exist at this point. It's what a tragedy they've become, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the just to clarify the points there. I mean, my home, arguably is worth. I guess what value is it? I mean, it's a home that you live in and bring your family up in, but the value or worth they'd put on it, say 1.6 to 1.7 million, and that is take away say your 500 of debt, they're going to be stealing 1.2 million of equity from me. So there's a significant amount of money that they're standing to make for that as well. But yeah, like you say, that there's some issues around. There's been a slow and gradual encroachment, abuse of the systems. We see a lot of it is run by the lawyers and the ringmasters around it, and they've been given because lawyers are members of the Law Society, and obviously all the judges are ex-law society, and they're protecting the bar. There is certainly issues around how these people are swearing and to uphold the bar and the corporations, which are dead entities. These are mindless bits of paper that only really have any action or anything done for them because living people act on their behalf and choose to take homes away from people because of some corporation or loss, but that's a dead entity. But they've been given human status or person status, which allows them to act within the system. So there's some real issues going on with that. like you say, you've alluded to the real estate market. I mean, a lot of the homes in New Zealand and around the world will be empty at the moment. There's been a significant amount of people that have, I would expect, died because of certain things that they've received via injection with the toxins in that. New Zealand was going pretty well before the injections arrived in New Zealand. I've heard evidence, and I haven't been able to verify that, but our population drops from 4.8 million down to 4.2, I think. And then at the time, while we were all in lockdown, they're flooding the country with immigrants under a mass immigration policy, which wasn't notified to the public. And they've brought in hundreds of thousands of people that aren't going into quarantine, but coming across the borders and filling up the homes of those that are deceased. So we've had a pretty big shift in the population in New Zealand as well from that. So that's a massive shift again. And I don't know where the money or who's paying for these people to come in and there, but it seems to be a definite shift as well. So yeah, there are, to your point, the real estate market shouldn't be existing because homes and it should be a basic human right to own a home and be in there. So that should be something that everyone should actually be entitled to. And just because you choose not to play a game, the money game, should not stop you from owning, having a roof over your head.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the opening track of this. There's this band from Massachusetts called The Unseen. And, I mean, I grew up listening to this band. They were a hardcore punk band, And they had this final record called Internal Salvation, which a really interesting record, like very advanced stuff. And the opening, I think it's track 1 on that album. And Mark's lyrics on it are talking, like, just feeling like, all this going in, the dreadful outcomes. Some people don't have a home, and it's like you can't think of lyrics like that. It's like that's what I love about hardcore music, and that's why I'm a hardcore musician, is because you can just say stuff like it is, and it's like, to me, it's like now what I've been doing ever since making a bunch of records is now I'm just like, well, I'm trying to actually talk to the people. I'm trying to actually give them the ability to speak up about what's actually going on, because we can sing this lyrics all we want, we really can, and we should. Absolute magic occurs in music, and but there's something really crazy about this situation where it's like, we could blame capitalism, but it's like we can also just literally look at people who are just stealing the land from under your feet. And then even beyond that, charging us money to live with the justification for who's going to fill up the potholes. It's like, wait, what? Without governments, people build roads. In my purview, we'll just have a little fun here. If I'm to grow my own potatoes, right, and I'm a farmer, let's say I grow a lot of potatoes and I get really good at growing potatoes. And I want to sell potatoes because I have too many of them, and just to balance out, make some trades, commerce, if you will. I like society. I'd like to have commerce. Well, what you're gonna do is build yourself a road, because with all that effort it's like you don't need a government to build the road to get your potatoes off the farm. So they've insisted to us with all this building the roads incorrectly, and for anybody out there who's still doing that. And they're still trying to say, but what about the education system? And what about the science? It's like, okay, 2,000 years ago, I mean, I'm very critical of the Romans, don't get me wrong, but they built their roads correctly somehow. And those roads never got a pothole. Isn't that weird? And here we are today, Americans, and I like to know the numbers for you, but Americans today, and I'm gonna make the number less than what it actually is so that I don't exaggerate, but it's about 70 million plus per day Americans are paying to NASA. You and I know a lot about NASA. I won't tell people too many spoilers, just watch my film Vanishing Point and then we can all talk about it at a plaza. It's about chess and rockets. So that's all I can really say about that topic of NASA and such, because, I want to give people something to see for themselves. And I want the realms of discovery to be a philosophical journey for the individual, So I'm not here to, shake the pillars and tell people, well, find out for yourself whether you're on this or you're just not. Just, so that's the thing. That's kind of why I've shifted my focus. Like, I spent a lot of time behind a drum set, and it shifted into an editing form, and now it's brought me to this point where, in the middle of writing my book, I got to meet you through some other people who are, very cool with magic and stuff, and like, this is the stuff where the realms of metaphysics and such is gonna, like, absolutely. This is what these people who are selling the slave population on materialistic science. That is how they cast their spells. And it's the realms of excess of totalitarian sorcery, which has gotten to this point where people are not only waking up to, the truth about this. What does it matter? It's like, well, what it matters is, should we be paying to live? Like, I love having a coin in between two objects of commerce. That's fine, but this idea of, like, the heavy expenses, like, if you don't play this game, you get thrown out in the street, and then you're allowed to die. Like, this is the point where I'm like, okay, I have no choice. I'm just gonna let you talk here, and then, we'll see people at the plaza. We'd love to talk to everybody, see how it's going, see how everybody's enjoying working 9 to 5s. See how everybody's enjoying working, going to school for a decade after high school, where, remember in high school, in elementary school, when you had to raise your hand and ask your teacher for permission to empty your bladder in the bathroom? Is that a school or is that a prison? Then, after high school, you go to college, or you're supposed to if you want to be financially stable. And at the time, we were sold this idea that if you don't go to college, you're going to miss out on opportunities. You're not going to make a bunch of money. And I'm sure, like, if you've had your money, you probably have experience with that. And then beyond that, I have most of my friends who have even like great degrees in whatever they're in. We're being told by our parents' generation that, they went for the wrong degree. It's like, no. It's time to do the inner work and analyze whether this is right or not, because we have a sense of progeny here. We're trying to pass on this world to a next generation at all, because it's either these nations we're in, where you're in New Zealand, I'm here in America. Either we're gonna be the next, like, leveled out Gaza, we're gonna get carpet bombed, or we're not. And it's just like, well, our words create the reality, so here we are, using our words, because it's time to just reassess all this. It's time for people to put the pen in the paper and analyze what works for them. Try to go back to a system of voluntarism, where, if you don't consent to a system, if you don't consent to participating in a corporation, you shouldn't be forced to. Yet, here we are. And so what I know is people went to college for all that time, get their degrees and their straight A's the whole time, and they did everything the honest and right way, and you're getting $20 an hour doing whatever your respective specialty is. And like, that's, I'm sure you, like, $20 an hour is just like chump change around here. Our eggs are getting close to $10 for a carton of eggs right now. So, in half an hour of your work, after you went into extreme debt with college degree stuff, like, the average person is experiencing that as we speak. And I'm just like, well, hear out my friend who just had his home taken. Like, either we start like actually talking about this, and, like, we start, like, having some sense of peace with each other, not punching left or right, just like, let's let people talk to each other. Like, hey, let's let somebody be wrong in a conversation here and there, like, whatever. But it's pathological at this point that someone like you gets your home stolen from you because of some sort of shady business deal, and now you're out in your ass because like for no reason, for and no one can tell me there's a reason ever. That's it. Like there's no ability at this point for someone out there to be like, well, actually, you could like, but you're going to go human shield for the state. You're on the wrong side of history, and then you're not passing anything on to the future generations of people. So, like that's my, when I do that, I'm like, I'm done with this like PC shit. It's like it's time for people to just talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
totally agree,
anyways,
mate. Yeah, no, you've touched on a few points here. I agree with, and them crossing the threshold of my home and ignoring my Black's law is what they run on, and they by ignoring that they impinged on a fundamental, they broke a universal law of self-determination, where I was saying, I do not consent, I'm not part of the system, but they still bullied their way in. We call them the Bash Street kids. And they came in and they took it. So, yeah, that's when you look back at where that's come from, they've effectively been brainwashed. They haven't been given the appropriate training on true law, and you wind back and that's come from old laws that have been that have been there for an antiquity, but because they've over a certain period, and I think it was 1986 that they made the New Zealand government change from parliament to a corporation, and then corporations then have rights, and then so these laws have these domino effects where people are putting laws in place and they effectively rule from the grave, because once they've died or passed or whatever, these laws still exist and people still act on them. So we do need to kind of almost have a rolling constitution or of laws that are refreshed and for the contemporary age, and not having these antiquated laws. Like the High Court is well past its use by date, and the court system and the lawyers, because it's acting totally unfavourable against the people. Like government was originally created, for the people, by the people, but government, to govern means to control, and ment is from mente, which is mind, so it's controlling the mind. And from that,
mental.
mental, yeah, and from that, we're experiencing their propaganda that they put out. They've created wars and made people fight because people benefit from bombing a city, lending the money and rebuilding it, and someone's made money on dropping the bombs on rebuilding the city and financing it on the back of it. Likewise, they do that for conditioning kids and schooling and putting them into the system and only letting them get so far. They're never going to educate you to have a revolution. They're going to keep you a part of the system, a cog in the wheel, and you're never going to be able to kind of really see behind the veil, because they're only teaching you and conditioning you from a young age. Like you said, you have to ask to go to the toilet, you have to never question the teacher, or you have to, the scientists then become the authorities, which are never challenged, and they get things wrong, and they've been proven to get things wrong over eons. So the systems we're operating in are broken, and the wrong mindset and paradigms are currently underway. And the human mind and the words that we use, do create certain reverberations. So we have to be careful in how we use and how we treat each other, to create justice amongst us, and to elevate humanity, to have a higher understanding. Again, depends of how philosophical you want to get, but we are eternal beings having a spiritual experience here. We've had iterations and iterations of time here, and there's been resets, there's been melted buildings and evidence and layers of civilizations that we're on top of. We used to build homes out of stone and this amazing concrete that gets harder and harder with age, and supposedly they were built with pick and shovel, but that's a farce, because you can see they've got 30-foot high doors into it, and why would you build a 30-foot high door for a 6-foot high human? So history and his story has been totally manipulated to suit a certain narrative, and the truth has been hidden. So we are at a time where we need to be really dig in and looking at things practically. Like, and there's old antiquity. We used to have free energy systems. The cathedrals were cathodes, and they had drew down from the ether, and then they've removed the ether from the system. And there were five. The middle finger. John Levi, you're holding up a book. Excellent channel on his YouTube to go and have. He talks.
Everyone, check this guy out. John
I've
Levi, David Edward.
Yeah.
Evidence of the Old World. This is
learned a lot from those guys.
Great.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right, dude. And also James W. Lee's The One World Tartarians.
Yes, got that one as well.
Whether anyone agrees with that hypothesis or not, just worth checking out. That book is amazing.
Yeah. The evidence is irrefutable. I mean, you've got them across the realm. There are all of these similar sized, shaped and styled buildings that we're claimed to have only had limited resources and time to be built, but they're still standing. And there's been wars to take them out and hide evidence. And again,
meanwhile, look at my microphone cover here. Don't you realize the most advanced science ever took us into the vacuum of space here? Y'all, come on.
Yeah,
I gotta thank Tiff for these socks, just in case she's ever watching this episode. But
now, key thing there, and I don't want to do a spoiler on your things, but effectively the most abundant resource on the planet is water, and at rest, water needs to be contained, and it finds a flat and level surface. And therefore, you can throw a laser across it at 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 kilometers, 100,000 kilometers. It'll be showing a true straight from point A to point B. There will you'll be able to see them. It won't be dropping behind the supposed curvature. The mainstream narrative, in order to falsify that, 8 inches per square mile of curvature is required to create a 46,000 kilometre circumference of what we're told is a globe. That curvature doesn't seem to appear at any distance between point A and point B across any measure or length of distance of land. And then if you look up at the stars, where the Polaris and the stars rotate around, they are rotating across the North Pole, and they are not, there's no parallax, there's no change. Thousands of years later, the pyramids align up with the Orion Belt. And you look at the luminaries and how they operate, there are definite signs there. So between the water, the stars, and how the sun and moon operates, when you really observe and see things as they truly are, you start to understand that we have been hoodwinked. We've been probably told, for the last probably 100 or so years that a false narrative. Prior to that, every civilization and religion knew the truth. And we've only just really started, got to a point now where we have to kind of bring that understanding back, stop the deceit, stop the inversion of truth, and start to live in truth, because there's been a lot of people that have been harmed from these lies and deceit.
Right, and there's something so useful about using art as a medium. This is what I'm doing. I'm just giving you a sample, just a sample taste of more of the section of my film that talks about exactly what you're talking about. I just know my timestamps. I made the film, so I'm not as clever as David Weiss, where I imagine. And by the way, I'm gonna get a sense of humor here. Imagine David Weiss has this giant motherboard where he could just push a button and the video's behind him, and it's just he just knows, frequently asked questions, boom, boom. Me, I'm I know how to make one film, man. Here it is. I don't know. But using art as a way to transfer consciousness, and without doing all this pretentious mumbo jumbo of well, slow down. That's a hypothesis. No, maybe next year we could go out and measure it. It's well, we already measured it. It's no, you didn't. Okay, well, now we're going to have to go beyond science. And because what happened is they told us that these bells and stuff were melted for the wars. And these bells were used for healing. It's simple. They use these bells to prevent people from getting cancer and stuff, and to actually heal them using 432 hertz, 528 hertz frequencies, mainly solfeggio frequencies, the miracle frequencies and such. But these things is these world wars and stuff were were totally designed to punish the individual. Like, the governments were at war with their own people across the board. The allies were the bad guys too, everybody. Like, please stop with this. Like, I mean, there's a lot of disinfo with a lot of the war stuff. I mean, like, you know, I ate mushrooms one time and then hung out with my buddy Austin, and we sat there and like, hey, let's, you know, the camera was invented around the Civil War. Let's see if we can find a photo of people actually walking out into fields into straight rows because their generals tell them to, loading muskets and stuff, just like they show us in the Hollywood movies. And these people were like lined up right in front of each other, just as we were told in school. And by the way, we were told this in school. For me, it was like, I think I was like 9, 10 years old, you know, probably in the 4th grade. I want to say also the 2nd grade a little bit. But they told us all about the wars. They told people in the Civil War of America that like, between 1861 and 1865, that they freaking, oh, there's David Weiss right there just a second ago. But like, they told us that these people just went out there and pumped up their muskets and lined up willing to die, wool coats on a freaking hot day. And I think they did that to prime current soldiers to say, well, hey, going to war now is not as bad. And then they finessed everybody to actually showing up and shooting strangers for World War I. It's like World War II. Like, you went out and you just took your government's word for it, huh? Is that how this works? Like, and also for all these dipshits out there being like, oh, you know, Vietnam War vets and stuff, they were drafted. It's like, they could have said no. They got to go to jail. It's like, okay. The alternative is you get to go shoot people for your government. It's like, huh? And so that brings us into a sense of setting for where we're at. Like, people have been culled and tamed with like TV programming to think that, oh, things are okay now. It's all good. It's like, well, yeah, if you become like a targeted individual or you say anything out of line, you get your home taken away from you, dude. Like, huh? Like, this game called Let's Trade Pieces of Paper Till We Die, not too cool. Not very fun for anyone. It's wrong. And so us finding this thing about the world not being what they say it is, they say it's this, okay? They say that you live on that, and they're using it to hide land from you. They're using this vacuum to hide the ether, and they're also hiding the advent of intelligent design. Even if you want to zoom in real small to the size of your body, tell me about this evolution story while we have the most amazing optics ever with a human eye. No one can do it. And also, like, the thing crawling out of the water and eventually becoming a monkey. And it's like, this is the shit we were taught in school, and we were force fed this stuff. And you know, Eric DeBay said it right, man. Eric DeBay said, you know, the only useful things we actually got in school were freaking reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. Like, basic arithmetic enough to just like understand sacred geometry, perhaps.
Yep, totally agree. And again, there's a lot of evidence within sacred geometry and you know, the geometric patterns. You know, I think Pythagoras says, you know, was it Plato? You know, he who was ignorant of geometry shall not enter. So to really see the patterns of geometry and how things, that
was Pythagoras who said
Pythagoras, that. Was, yeah. To have
music
those
is geometry.
Yeah,
And then Goethe, author of the book Faust, said that music is liquid architecture, and architecture is just frozen music. It's shocking, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Nuts.
And you know, I've got a little prop for anybody watching. For anybody who's listening, just keep listening and fine. If you're driving, don't look, but you can look later or whatever. We're sitting at the 1 hour and 13 minute mark of the video, in case you want to look at this later. But this is the important part. This is a natural formation This is a formation in nature, okay? This is the 83rd element on the periodic table. This is called bismuth, okay? The boiling temperature for this, if I remember correctly, is about 520 degrees. And so that means you can melt this stuff and make it level just like water, okay? So that's when it becomes liquid. And then what happens is you can adjust how its shapes are. I would argue using frequency. In this case, music is magic stuff like which, by the way, there's a YouTube channel called Music is Magic. Recommend his stuff quite heavily. But this is bismuth, and it forms like this in nature. Nobody zoomed in with a tiny hammer and chisel and put this together. It's ridiculous, you know. And for people to, like, what does it look like? It looks like a cathode of the old cathedrals. Makes you think, like, what if you could just take this, shape it like this, pour some... I mean, maybe build metals around it. Maybe you could just pour concrete around it, or maybe you just leave it up there, because the Earth isn't going to get 520 degrees, and you find a way to put structure around it. Let's just say you and I are going off riffing. You could do this, pour concrete over it, and then just heat up the concrete, melt the bismuth out, and then you have a structure that was around the shape of what there was. And you do that over and over again until you have yourself a monolithic cathedral that's like, you know, that nobody can explain how it was built. I'm just guessing that might have something to do with it. I'm not like absolutely like, oh, this is the only way. I'm sure it was just one piece of one piece of pizza amidst the whole pie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just to check in another option there. I mean, I just thought of it as you were talking. I mean, direct energy weapons. There's evidence of them being around for a long time. And even if you look at the sculptures and the beautiful art that is created and the detail of those marble sculptures, like somebody didn't do that with a chisel. You know, it was done with high tech and and perhaps laser or AI technology that has been around a lot longer than we're told. Hey, it wouldn't be hard to even put a rough cast of that concrete and you could shape it with the laser or cutting it, and you see that even happening now. We can etch things with lasers. So who's to say, light and frequency and power sources, which were evident back then as well, weren't able to kind of shape or mold things or destroy. And again, that's probably how a lot of these cathedrals and things, supposedly burn down, which is really doesn't match up with how do you burn stone?
How do you burn down stone?
How do these bricks kind of have angled kind of cuts through them? How do these buildings have all tumbled down? Like, there was high energy weapons that were used to destroy these buildings over those wars, and they've been kind of whitewashing and taken away.
And that the meltology concept is definitely like, they must have been using Archimedes mirrors. And the Archimedes mirrors is hoodwinked in Indiana Jones 5, but like, if anybody wants to know what one of those is. But also, it's just like, you can take an old television set from like the 70s, which had thick glass on it, and you can make an Archimedes mirror out of that. But good information. Anyways, here's my stuff. I write about it, but like, it's that's a good spot to pause it right there. Boom! Look at my stuff. So it's just like this whole thing with the Archimedes mirror. That must be what they were doing in Maui and then in LA. And I recently had, like, there was a really cool musician who was posting online. His name is Jake, and he plays guitar in a band called the Casualties. And he was posting that him and his band were going to be doing something to a benefit show for the wildfires that happened in LA. I can understand why you would. A lot of people lost their homes, and there's some organizations that can organize that funding, and there's music and stuff you can use to raise funding for it. But I actually wrote to him, and I was like, hey, like, I've enjoyed your music for many years. It's cool, dude, but like, they weren't wildfires, dude. Like, check out Sean Hibbler's film called Maui in 15. Like, I'm just trying to give you better information. Like, I understand the compassion. I understand the confusion too, because not everyone is like at the tip of the spear on philosophy and finding out, oh my God, there's been a massive inversion in our reality, and we we don't live on this. That's insane because how many years of life lived have people put into this? Today, I actually stumbled upon a guy named Dr. Stephen Young. I think that's his name, and I'm gonna I'm gonna check in my history just to make sure I got his name right because I really want people to check this guy out. Um, I'm really impressed with what I saw, and I'll tell you, it was shocking, but it was really useful because he was a PhD astrophysicist, like PhD in astrophysics, everything. You know, like he really, he was really into that. Yeah, it's his name, Stephen A. Young, and there's a video of his called "Live in Edinburgh." I'll just put it up right here. It's this thing. This guy talks for a bit, and even at the 130, like 135, maybe 134 mark, he gives my friend Joe Hanvey a shout out because Joe Hanvey did a really great model of the world in his basement, just using like just he was like, well, let's just ignore everybody and try to see if we can use the Bible and see if we can scientifically replicate what the Bible is saying, and it worked. So, if you haven't checked out Joe Hanvey, he's excellent. But anyways, this Stephen Young guy, think about what kind of ego death that guy must have gone through to get a PhD in this absolute dumb brain freaking sorcery that they provide, right? And then to come out and be like, "Oh my God, it's all wrong. They're all lying." And here's my book about it, and the world's flat. Like, and he says it without saying it because I can tell what's really useful about that lecture is that anybody out there who might not know what the flat earth argument is, this guy will ease you into it in a way that my film would ease you into it. But he does it in a way with words. So if you prefer the presentation like that, like just throw something easy on while you're at work, like that's a pretty good one for that. But like it's just amazing seeing what's possible when someone's able to transcend their ego, no matter how big the investment is. And a really cool quote, I use it in my film, but it's actually from the film Revolver, which my film is kind of about. Revolver by Guy Ritchie. And there's a quote that appears somewhere in the film, and it says, first rule of business, protect your investment. Etiquette of the Banker, 1773. And I never, like, I couldn't unsee that. But, like, we're just living this inverse reality system in which people are protecting their investments. And by protecting their investments, so this ties into your story. Somebody put money down, and then somebody made a lot of money off of some shisty deal regarding this parasitic real estate shit. And then as a consequence, you got squeezed out of your home by force, by totalitarian force. And, like I say, I just want this interview to be an assisting documentation for you to tell your story. And I also want for anybody out there to listen, like understand that not all is hopeless, all like just if you can't be active in the thing, this and that, just say what's true. Just pass the information along. I'm not even saying everybody needs to go out and be an activist. I know some people got kids to raise, some people are in situations, some people are in like debt and stuff. I envision a time at some point in time really soon due to conversations like this one that people really can get together at the plaza, and then we can assess whether we're in debt or not. And no matter what the numbers say, if we run out of things to lose because they're making us lose them all and they're taking our lives away, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Now we have to go and assess whether we're even in debt or not. And so when people say, "Oh, the United States is $30 trillion in debt," and I was like, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not in debt. But the people close to me are not in that debt. And why do you even? They just printed the money, and then they went and bombed and killed a bunch of people with it, based on psychological warfare initially, and it eventually effectuated into material warfare. So, you know, it's not hard to be anti-war. Like, it really isn't. Like, having a sense of militarism in a village means you have some people around protecting the thing and looking out for the old people and walking people across the street and stuff. But man, it is baffling seeing what it's come to, and I think it's just like, no, you got an invincible argument for what you've got going on, and no one should lose their home in such a way.
No.
And now, you know,
And
so
agree with that. Like you've covered some ground there, but just to touch on like the debt issue, like I'm not massively religious. I mean, I've read bits of the Bible and understood bits of it. To me, it's a bit of a masterpiece with a lot of encoded kind of knowledge in it when you
a
kind of are able
magical
to.
book, I'd say.
Yeah, it's incredible. But one of the things, even the versions of the Bibles have been manipulated by those in power of the period. So, the Geneva version of 1560, which was prior to the Great Flood, had in there that we should forgive our debts, not forgive our sins. So sins has been added in instead of debt. So therefore, and equally, man has dominion over the realm, or as opposed to rule over it. So, we should have dominion as man. A species, man, it's mad that we charge ourselves to live on this realm, and we take each other and create wars and things to, benefit each other. Where, we should all be living as one, and cooperating, and I think we could achieve a golden age again when we start to realise that we can do that. But there's got to be a lot of truth and reconciliation in order for us to forgive and move on from that, and a lot of old ways and old traditions challenged, a lot of old religions and ways that are occurring that are detrimental to the way of life and how we live. So we've got a lot of kind of work and learning and things to do, but I think as we all kind of lead the charge in trying to get this information out, make people aware, bring them back into connecting with their soul again and having heart and feelings, and not just being desensitized and dehumanized, and because we see a lot of this on the news and wars and bombs, and everyone just thinks that's part of it. But no, this isn't how we used to be. We were born innocent and pure, and we have been taught to lie and taught to buy into the system and act in a way. But if we ever created a system and environment where children come into we talk about emanatize the eschaton, which is to create heaven on earth, and that is also relating to raising your vibration, and the Christ oil, which is Greek is oil
Christos.
is Christos, is raising that oil and creating, hitting the pineal gland and creating the land of milk and honey, and in the heaven, in the head, and heaved, and so on Atlas Shrugged, the 33rd vertebrae is, so all these numbers and coded are in there, have different meanings, but the key thing is to create an environment where we have a vibration, we live and share and respect each other, and stop this madness. It's just walking around with this knowledge, you feel insane.
Like a resurgence to the villages.
To get away from this kind of, I think a diverse monoculture of things across it. So we don't all have to be the same and speak from one world government or one world order, but we can all be unique, as opposed to being treated like a pine forest where we're commercially all one asset and all have to be the same shape and size and conform. It's more like a natural rainforest. We've got pockets that grow and die and act in natural kind of act in natural cycles. But a big tell was when the C19 went across the board. To get everyone across the realm acting in unison, in step, was not a natural move. It really smacked of a higher agenda, and there were a lot of people that were effectively acting there. And the same for the reason, as you're pointing to there, we're all thinking the same, or taught the same thing for what the shape of this place is. But again, if you confuse people and you distract them, you divide them, and you can rule them and you can control them. And that's when people need to come back to themselves, understand who they are, what they are, why they're here, and we're going to start repairing and healing this place again.
Yeah, and I want to add to something you said earlier on this. You mentioned now there was mistranslations of the Bible. I found this a really interesting thing called the hexapla, and hexapla is not a hex. It's like 6 different translations into English, and at the top of the giant book of this is going to be the original Greek or the original Hebrew, right? And so below that you have the part where it's like, okay, here's the Matthew's Bible from, like, I think it's 1537 or something. Then you have the Geneva Bible 1599. Then you have the King James version 16 something. Then you have the New International Version or whatever leading up to a certain amount of time. You get to find the anomalies in these things. I have it on PDF, so I can just kind of Command F my way through it. I'm not trying to, like.
I mean, the time thing you talk about there is even that's in question, because they've got coins that have I-999, and so Isis, or times of that of the sun. So, and then you've got buildings that had Roman numerals that have photos prior to 1900 had we were in 1968, say, and then afterwards they've added an M in front of it, which adds another 1,000 years. So our timeline has been affected
I definitely don't think. I definitely agree with you. I think they added 1,000 years into the timeline. I think that the ancients, or the stories we hear of the ancients, even Plato, Aristotle, the even the stories that were written around Old Testament, New Testament, even mythology, Norse mythology, old wives' tales, pagan stories, all these things, probably much more recent in history. And what happened is, what we're observing is, because we can see windows built into these buildings that sneak right above the ground. Nobody would build a window that goes under the ground. No sensible architect would do that, but yet we see it. What we think may have happened is that the giant mud floods were done by something, probably using sound vibration, in this case black noise. I somewhere in my book I read about the part where David Bowie, the musician, talked about this on I think it was the Dick Cavett show in 1972, if I remember the year correctly.
Yeah, I saw
But
that one.
I want to point out something about mistranslation, just so we can clear the air for anybody who's religious, those kind of things. We're going to start with the Ephesians 6:12, written from the 1599 Geneva Bible. And I'm going to tell you what it said in 1599. And keep in mind, the King James version, King James was a Freemason. King James, well, there's some problems with King James, totalitarian of sorts. But I'm gonna show the evidence for how petty these people are regarding their authority and what they're willing to do to preserve their authority, aka, just like I said from that quote that I got from the movie Revolver, protect your investment. Okay, so Ephesians 6:12 in the 1599 Geneva Bible reads, For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the worldly governors, the princes of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness, which are in the high places. Telling you where it's located too. And for anybody who wants a little evidence, here's my phone right up to the screen, and you can screenshot that if you want. Okay, so then next I'm going to pull up the contrast. we're going to read the same one from the King James Version, which, this is the Bible that you can get in a bookstore. It's crazy. You could get this one in a bookstore really easily. And it seems like everybody likes that. All the churches like that one too. Oh, that's just funny. It says, Ephesians 6:12, King James Version. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Well, doesn't mean anything. Against spiritual wickedness in high places. Like, just if there's spiritual wickedness in high places, if you see, like, it's like they took it and tamed it a bit, and it's so manipulative. I'm disgusted by this, and that inversion occurs through the whole Bible, like many times. And then you have to etymologically find the essence for where these words come from. So you go find the Hebrew translation of something, right? A good friend of mine, Jared, I'll say his name's Jared, really brilliant guy. Like, my God, he's a razor sharp guy. He joined with me and Taylor Price on one of those lives where we just talked for a while. And I'm gonna tell you, this guy figured something out with this Bible stuff, and I know there's other people who might have figured this out too. And but like, when there's a lot of Old Testament stuff where it tells you all about these families and stuff, and you see this person beget this whole, and it names the whole family full of these people you'll never meet or read about even in the Bible. But then he found that you can take those things and you can find what the words actually say, translate, reverse engineer the words, put them back into English based on what the direct translation is of those words, and find that they just told you a soap opera with a bunch of nobodies instead of telling you what this stuff is. And he found that anytime you find these parts in the Bible where where there's a lot of names on it, it actually says something. So Riddler from Batman decided to freaking script the Bible with all these meaningless names in it. And I'm not saying all the names are meaningless, but people know what I mean. If there's no essence to the verse, then okay, like, this person beget this family and they were named this, right? It's like reverse engineer those words and write them down and see what you see. And what happens is it gives even someone like me an incentive. It will give anyone an incentive to just take a look at the Bible, and that's where we extract value from. You don't have to be ideological to take a look and re-examine these things, because a lot of public eyes are looking at it, and like, true cosmology comes through a lot of old scriptures and stuff, but this kind of stuff gets into like how you can raise your vibration, the Christ oil, the milk and honey stuff, just like what you're talking about. This is really valuable because the human experience can become stagnant if people just eat wrong and they treat themselves bad, if they use word magic that's like cruel to themselves. Oh, I'm just some guy. Well, then the reality that's around you is going to adjust accordingly. And we have to see ourselves as mystics and philosophers. And that's, otherwise, like, what is life? Like, really? You want to just be a fart in the wind? You just want to be some guy? I'm good on that. But anyways,
No, I agree, and it's an interesting thread that I've kind of pulled on and seen, and one that kind of reaffirms for me certain things is, they talk about, when Jesus walked on water, and that's an interesting kind of concept of, he could well have done it with a miracle, but what it actually is an interpretation of the sun walking on water, which is the reflection of sun over a flat surface. A rounded surface has a spot, but a long surface is created when sun casts, at sunset you see the long. So that's the sun walking on water, and that creates the symbol Ankh, which is the Egyptian Ankh, symbol of life as well. So, and then you've got, Jesus as a derivation of the Greek Isis, and so that is the Saviour. And who saves us every day from the darkness when the sun approaches and goes around? So the pagans and their harvest and their festivals and from the dark night, relied on the sun because the sun brings life and is the savior. So in hominem Salvador, IHS is, in hoc signes is in the sign which we shall conquer. These are referencing the sun, and so the sun walking on water can be coming back to the sun as and rarefied through the old times. Ra is referenced to the Egyptians. So all of them say the same story around the sun, but it doesn't mean that we are revolving around it. It is demonstrably going around us if you look at it with your eyes, and it is casting light upon the water. So these are things that are encoded in the Bible when you start to kind of look at them critically and understand what the messages they were trying to say. And it was written at a time where we spoke differently, and you need to get your head into the context of how they were speaking, and certain words hadn't been created or understood at that time. So that's why it takes a level of discernment to, like you say, understand the etymology of words and really understand what they were saying and where it's been derived from. I mean, a lot of our words and letters are actually derived from the stars when you look up, and the star signs and the certain linguistics have been created from the stars, and then that's a vibration and that's a sound, and that's what gives it power. So stars are
and we are the stars too, in some sense. Like, there's something about this, like Santos Bonacci explains this quite well in his like syncretism mystery schools and stuff. But I agree with a lot of his work. Like, astrotheology is kind of where we take the Bible and we find, okay, what's the sun walking on water? Okay, when you see the sunset over water, what's the sun doing except the light looks like it's walking on water towards you, to your perspective too. And I think there's something about the compression in which people have felt like this type of sorcery, which did this to people. This icon of sorcery is a totalitarian form of sorcery, but it's a form of compression, and you have to compress gunpowder so that it explodes, right? And so they've compressed us so much, and they backed us up into a corner. And I agree. Like, we're moving. Like, I think it's already begun. The eon of Aquarius is upon us. Like, and it's about the transition into that understanding for what that actual new world would be. It cannot be one in which we capitulate to the new world order. Over my dead body, I say.
I think, like I say, there is a transitional period we're going through. There's going to be people not, their world is ending and changing, but that doesn't mean the world ends. It just means their way of life and their privilege and the abuse that they've done to people is going to end. We're transitioning out of these old archaic systems, ways of money, traditional way of doing things, and there are actually, to put some positive perspective on, there is actually new things being created. There are ways of for instance, to work around the law, creating private trusts that allow people to, they're not legal entities, but they're under the protection of a trust, which all the assets can go into and we can all share in the benefit of. This can also be used, for the benefit of, challenging in courts and legal arguments. So there are ways and means of, pooling our assets to safeguard them and to create new ways of societies. I mean, when you've got councils of people and kind of if you think about like the brain and how it creates the synapses, it's all connected like a network, just like a mycelium or a fungus or a mushroom and the fruit of. So there are ways of taking away this globalization and breaking it back down to a more kind of farmers market style way where it's decentralized and people are acting more naturally and there can be cross-pollination. If someone does something well here, that can be transferred, and everyone's kind of looking for the greater good. But while there's, there are effectively psychopaths at the top of the helm, ruling it for the benefit and passing on their intergenerational wealth, and that's protected by laws that they've created. It's really hard to break these down. So we need a bit of a jubilee around debt. We need the people to start acting and cooperating amongst themselves and talking about it and bringing out awareness and remembering who we are. We are divine beings, and we are here to help and create and enjoy. We've come here to enjoy feelings and sensations and love and experience emotions, but it's not much fun. I came in as a child wondering, when is things going to get better? It doesn't really seem like it's great, and it's been a long, hard period where but I think we're starting to see now a transition where people are starting to change and take action and start remembering and behaving as we should, and the divine masculine and the divine feminine are starting to unite and becoming whole within ourselves. So critical parts of kind of self, becoming self and whole, and a lot of psychology and thought, and everyone needs to look in the mirror and like the person they see in the mirror and act in a way that you are in honor and you are noble, and these are things that you can do, and you look after and respect your body, and you don't put the poisons in, and you eat pure food, and you start to heal, and your healthy body, healthy mind, let food be thy medicine, are critical things to actually allowing things to improve.
That's exactly right, dude. And it's like that's the thing, is solutions or removals of the cause of the problem. We discover that with this terrain model of health. It's everything. There might be an imperfection into everything, but it's like, if you need a reminder that the divine ones are here, that the higher beings are a part of this reality just the same as the lower beings. We're right in between it. We live in a dielectric torus field, meaning as above, so below. As within, so without. And, that's something that even more of my agnostic friends out there could relate to, because maybe you can find it in some lyrics or something. But, like, these things matter a lot. And, if we live at the center of a dielectric magnetic torus field, what's happened is, we're at the center, the plane of inertia. That thing we're standing on is dense matter, and Archimedes' principle of 300 BC explains perfectly why things rise and fall, with the exception of electrostatics. And electrostatics, well, instead of, well, what about gravity? Gravity. It's like, okay, well, Isaac Newton came up with the word gravity, and he came up with the word gravity and postulated it after the apple fell on his head, so they say in the stories. But it was the year 1666. But that's also the years of whatever we're being told we live in, where someone inserted 1,000 years into something, and here we are. And maybe that wasn't the year 1666. Maybe that was the year 666, because and come on, like, we all know what that number means. We've all heard the Iron Maiden song, like, whatever. Like, take it easy, everybody. Like, that's the thing. It's not gravity. There's no force pulling things down. Like, somebody wants to tell me that when I drop this, that there's a force. I'm going to drop this, okay? There's a force? You mean to tell me there's a force coming up and grabbing this thing and pulling it down? That's what they say. It's they postulate. They need the gravity thing to insist upon their model. This shit is just art, okay? And, like, these are artists who did it, and what does that make them when they do this kind of art? And also, what if it makes them magicians when they do that kind of art? To my friends out there who are making albums and drawing stuff, and you don't know what does that make you? Like, think about it. Like, have some self-respect, everybody. Nothing is pulling this down. This has something of an electrostatic positive charge, and the Earth has a negative, but it's meeting to its relative medium because the pressure gradient in between it, there's no pressure gradient in between it, so it falls. Yeah. Because the phenomenon, Ken Wheeler calls it dielectric acceleration, and he's trying to be exact with his words because he's into metaphysics and stuff. Ken Wheeler's brilliant. He has a channel called Theoria Apophasis. I don't agree with everything he says, but I don't have a problem with the things I don't agree with him on. Like, whatever, dude. I think he just seems like a cool guy. Like, he seems fun, and also like he does know a lot. He does read Boscovich and Walter Russell. Another great physics person is our mutual friend, and how we met. Scott was our mutual friend. Taylor Price, damn, that guy's he's a real wizard, you know.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is like when we see these things drop like that, it's like okay, it's moving to its relative medium. It's Archimedes' density and buoyancy principle. Archimedes' principle explained this perfectly in 300 BC. It's just at some point in time, somebody wanted to do this to everyone and force everyone into an enslaved system so that they could gain ownership over the eon of Aquarius, which we just landed ourselves into. Go ask some hot girl who knows about astrology. What's going on? What's the eon of Aquarius? What's the 26,000 year great year? Like they might not even know about flat Earth yet and like the implications, but on the metaphysical level, they do like at least like look at the constellations and think about it in an emotional format. So the union of those opposites, the divine feminine and the divine masculine reaching union, is exactly what the totalitarian state cannot afford to happen. And that's why there's so much effort to keep us broke as shit. It's so much effort to keep us using passports, to prevent our freedom of travel, to prevent us from achieving any sort of economic opportunity. Now, it's not just me that can't like find extra work around here. Everybody's really tight with their money. Ugh! Like that's not the way, because the future forms of currency are going to be energy exchange. It's going to be aesthetics, because we're done with this game, and all people got to do is resonate with this message, pass it along. And then, I don't know, if you're listening along with this, watch my shit. Check it out. proxyearth.substack.com. Have fun with that. And then, to make it easier on yourself, don't lock yourself in a room for 20,000 hours like I did. Freaking just tell your friends about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Free subscriptions are available for people who are broke, because trust me, I understand. I get it. But like, yeah, if you got the affordability to it, there's bonus content for the people who choose to be paid subscribers. And then there's obviously perks for founding members and those kind of things. And what we're doing is building an initiative to philosophically educate from the ground up. Hey, here's how we know what we know. Like, we're the ones telling you not to get freaking poisoned. We're the ones not trying to make a buck off you. We're just, like, and even so, even if we weren't paying to live, it's like the exchange of a coin there's nothing wrong with it. That's not usury. Usury is forcing people to do it.
No, definitely. I think, and you touched on a few things there, but the history has a lot of constructs, and I think I not that I've ever met the guy, but Newton sounds like one, and perhaps he gave false information, because, like you say, gravity is never been proven. It's not a proven theory, and you can Google that, and it admits no proof. And to me, it's the buoyancy density medium, where you've got a dense medium falling through a less dense medium to find equilibrium. So as Ira's dropping there, it's a dense object falling through a less dense medium air, and it's finding equilibrium in his hand. And if he took his hand away, it'd find equilibrium on the floor. And Newton's apple, if it had gone into the ground, it stopped at equilibrium, but then it found equilibrium if it had been fallen into a pond, it would have found equilibrium in the pond and would have floated, because the apple is less dense than the water. So it only explains half of it. Electromagnetism, again, is, as you say, the rise and fall of gravity is half of the equation. It's the measurement of acceleration for an object that's falling, but it doesn't account for the rise of an object, a hot air balloon, or anything that has lift or buoyancy. It doesn't. But if you can add a charge with red mercury and a positive negative, you can create levitation. So through applying positive charge, you can get lift, and through a negative, you get that. So you get a dense medium, it drops to the bottom, and a positive medium at thing. So again, there is charges, and with the toroid and the positive charge, you get a lifting. You get the sun on water. It charges it, it lifts, and then as it gets heavier in the clouds, it falls back down. So you've got a natural cycle inside the toroid that you're observing there. So in nature, you can see it occurring, and it's everything, as above, so as below, so as above. So these repeating patterns that you can see and identify when you start looking at these in detail.
And that expands the conversation into one about the moon. You can charge your stones with the moon, things like that. It's like, oh, well, if you think the moon is just some stone in space that a bunch of people can safely land a rocket on, and then safely leave the moon and come back. Oh wait, what do they do? They use gravity, and then they slingshotted themselves, and then they got to and then they did a lunar lander, and then they got back off, and they got here back home safe and sound, right?
Yeah, it's
And
pretty
it's
easy
like,
with the moon. I mean, you look at the color of the sky when it's grey or blue or dark
right.
or red. The color of the moon is seen through that, so it's obviously a clear plasma. You can see stars as it floats past, in its geometric kind of path or celestial plane. Stars can be seen behind or through the moon. Therefore, it's not a solid object, and it doesn't obey the laws
It's
of a
not.
solid
It's
object.
not. Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to that Ephesians 6:12 King James version, where it says, "Well, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against," and what it says, against powers. Because what this shit is, they're trying to disempower you. And if you don't even know what the moon is, like you think it's a stone in space, oh, just I think it's 238,000 miles away. It's like, okay, well, less than me. That's cool. Cool PhD you got. Like, great. But guess what? We can figure out that, no, it's cosmic. The best way to explain it is sonoluminescent cosmic X-ray mirror, which is a cosmic plasma. And the plasma is the fourth state of matter. So the moon is really important. It's the negative where the sun is a positive. It's the she and the sun the he. And these are conscious things in the sky, meaning, whoops, magic's real. Ha ha. You guys like Star Wars so much, but the Force couldn't be real, right? But if it was enabled in your mind a little bit and somebody prodded you enough, you might find yourself being able to do something supernatural once in a while. And that's why you mentioned the mycelium in the brain. This is all the mycelium mushrooms is brain food. And another sign proving that we're in the eon of Aquarius, and this happened to me the other day, because, to get any sort of information about how are these things grown and what's the this and that, it's really interesting. Like, I want to see someone else's time lapse of this stuff. You used to have to go on really backdoor websites like Live Leak and BitChute and stuff to find stuff like this, but now there's so many people throwing it on YouTube that big tech can't do anything. They're just you can't pay your workers enough to care enough to freaking delete these videos. And then what's happening? Now people are just putting their mushrooms on YouTube and showing everybody how to bring the mushroom consciousness out from the depths, and quit calling it drugs. It's not a drug. I think ethically, yeah, don't drive a car on it, I guess. But oh my God, it's mushrooms, it's food. And also there, mind that there are really helpful books that you can find in local stores helping you identify which ones are actually bad. Mind that some of them are poisonous, and then figure out there are ways to test these things. But the mushrooms themselves are conscious. They eat plants and vegetables just like we do. And when we ingest them, they become a part of us. They aspire to us. They worship us. What? And even in a verse in the Bible, I'm not even going to pull it up, but it said, "Ye are gods," words from Jesus, talking to the people who are criticizing him so much. Haven't I said to you, "Ye are gods"? It's like, well, what does that make us, y'all? Hey, all these artists and stuff out there, how's your new album? Right? Cool. What? Oh, but I'm just a guitar player. I'm just some guy. Anyways, I guess I'll just put my mask on. Like, hey, men out there, have some self-respect. Most of the women in my life are wondering when the fuck you're gonna bring them flowers. Start doing the weird shit. Start doing the stuff like be more than just some freaking guy who watches porn and shit. So like do something, like the Civ song.
Totally agree. Another conversation to unpack a lot about that, but yeah, you've got, reflections of Yelbert Doeth and the brain mimics, looks like lion's mane in the mushrooms. So, things that you eat are good for your brain. So that's there. I'm conscious of time. We're probably approaching 2 hours.
Oh, yeah. And they made the mycelium illegal just so the drug dealers could rack the prices up so much. It's like, this needs to stop. This is insane. Like, we have to take this stuff into our own hands in some sense, but like the highly expensive lifestyle ain't it. So I guess so it's coming up on the 2-hour mark. I think that this thing might close off soon unless it just keeps recording, but do you have any final thoughts?
Do no harm, don't be a dick is essentially how we all need to improve how things are. So yeah, just be conscious, but yeah, look after yourself, respect yourself, value yourself as a human being, and just look after your fellow man. It's time we kind of started to cooperate again and stop this fighting, and it's just madness.
Yeah, absolutely. Respect yourself. Like, oh yeah, go. You got a crush on someone? Bring him the freaking flowers. Do be the mystic. Don't. I just because I can make cocktails and be a bartender doesn't make me that. That's just a thing. It's like that's one thing I can do. If I burn this Palo Santo, does that make me a wood burner? What the heck? That's just something we do. We can think multiple things at once. It's time for people to get philosophical. I'll see everyone here at the plaza sometime because that's where this is all going. We're all going to go to the plaza. We're going to reassess all this kind of thing, and we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to cook food for each other, and I don't know, enter the eon of Aquarius, if you will. So Scott, it's been great talking to you, man. Thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, man, likewise. Much love to everyone, and I love you all, and I hope you all life starts improving for everyone, and you find your soulmate and love and peace and happiness.
Yeah. And before I go, everyone read my stuff, watch my stuff, have fun. Like, when you get a movie night, watch my film. I don't know, just kick your feet back and just enjoy it. Take it for a ride. Maybe there's something to learn there. I don't know. Maybe you don't live on this. Wake up. This is not good. We're paying to live because a bunch of people pretended to take this picture. This is art, okay? And the old world cathedrals and stuff. Well, all those old buildings, the cathedrals and stuff, they're stolen. They were stolen from the people who actually constructed them and were using them as energy systems. Free and infinite energy systems that no one had to pay for. So, think about it, everyone. See you later. ProxyEarth.substack.com. I'll see y'all later. Take it easy.